My grandson turned 20, and his mother decided I wasn't worth a seat at the table. My son sent me a text like I was hired help. "Clean up, we'll be back late with guests." That's when I realized I'd been living in someone else's house for 8 years, pretending it was still home. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The text came at 3:30 on a Tuesday afternoon. I was folding Marcus's laundry, yes, at 67. I was still doing my grown son's washing because Jennifer claimed she was too busy with Tyler's college preparations. The irony wasn't lost on me that Tyler was apparently too busy celebrating his 20th birthday to include the grandmother who'd helped raise him. Mom, taking everyone to Chez Laurent for Tyler's birthday. "Clean up, we'll be back late with guests. Thanks. Thanks." Like I was the cleaning lady. I stared at that message for a full 5 minutes, sitting on the edge of my bed in what used to be my bedroom before Jennifer decided it would make a better guest room. I'd been sleeping in the basement guest room for 2 years now, ever since Jennifer's mother started visiting for weeks at a time. Chez Laurent, the restaurant where Marcus proposed to Jennifer 20 years ago, the place where we'd celebrated every major milestone in Tyler's life, his high school graduation, his acceptance to Ohio State, his first job, every milestone except this one, apparently. I walked to my small basement window and looked up at ground level, watching the neighbors' cats prowl through my former garden. Jennifer had torn out my roses last spring, said they were too much maintenance. She'd replaced them with decorative rocks. Very modern, she'd said, very convenient. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Tyler, texting from upstairs. "Sorry, Grandma, Mom made plans weeks ago and forgot to mention it. Rain check? Rain check." Like spending time with his grandmother was a tennis match that could be rescheduled when the weather improved. I climbed the basement stairs to the main floor of the house that had been mine for 25 years. The house where I'd raised Marcus after his father died of cancer when he was 14. The house I'd let them move into temporarily when Tyler was 4 and they were going through their rough patch. The house that somehow became theirs while I became the inconvenient relative sleeping in the basement. The living room smelled like Jennifer's vanilla candles and her expensive perfume. My old furniture had been relegated to the basement, replaced with her stark white couches that no one was allowed to eat on. The family photos on the mantel were all of her side of the family now. The only picture of me was from Marcus's wedding, barely visible in the background. I heard Marcus's BMW pull into the driveway, my driveway, legally speaking, though I'd stopped mentioning that years ago. Through the window I watched them pile out, laughing and animated. Marcus in his best suit, Jennifer in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Tyler looking handsome and happy. They were beautiful together, my family. Beautiful and complete without me. They didn't even glance toward the house as they drove away in Jennifer's SUV, heading to a celebration I'd helped plan for 19 years before this one. I stood at that window until their taillights disappeared around the corner, and something inside me shifted. Something that had been cracking for years finally broke clean through. I walked to my basement room and pulled out the suitcase I hadn't used since my last visit to my sister in Phoenix. Then I stopped, struck by a thought that made me smile for the first time in weeks. They wanted me to clean up? I'd give them exactly what they asked for. The beauty of being invisible for 8 years is that you learn everyone's patterns without them noticing yours. Marcus would drink too much at fancy dinners. He always did when he was trying to impress Jennifer's friends. Jennifer would insist they bring people back to show off their renovated house. Tyler would go along with whatever his parents suggested because confrontation wasn't worth the drama. They'd be gone until at least midnight, maybe later. Plenty of time for what I needed to do. I'd been saving money for 3 years, ever since I realized my welcome had expired. Robert's life insurance had paid off the house when he died, and I'd been careful with the small inheritance from my mother 2 years ago. While Marcus assumed I was living on Social Security alone, I'd quietly tucked away money every month, $4,200. 42. Enough for a new start if I was careful. I started with my clothes, folding everything neatly into 2 suitcases. 8 years of living in one room teaches you to pack efficiently. My photo albums went into a small box. Along with my mother's jewelry and the few pieces of my grandmother's china, Jennifer hadn't accidentally broken or donated. In the back of my closet, behind the winter coats I rarely needed anymore, I found the box I'd been avoiding for months. Robert's things, my husband's watch, his reading glasses, the leather journal where he'd kept track of his woodworking projects. I'd moved these items from hiding place to hiding place, unable to let go but unwilling to display them where Jennifer might decide they didn't fit her aesthetic. I held Robert's journal for a moment, remembering how he'd sit at the kitchen table every evening, updating his project notes in careful handwriting. He'd been so methodical, so practical. What would he think of what I'd become? What would he think of what I was about to do? "You'd tell me it was about time," I whispered to the empty room. The hardest part was the kitchen. I'd been cooking for this family for 8 years, keeping track of everyone's preferences, making sure Tyler had his favorite cookies for school, preparing Marcus's lunches the way he liked them. The spice rack was mine, accumulated over decades of cooking. The good knives were wedding gifts from my marriage to Robert. I packed them all. Jennifer could figure out how to cook for her own family. Or they could order takeout with the money they were saving by not having to support me anymore. Not that they'd been doing much of that anyway. By 9 o'clock, I had everything important loaded into my car. The rest, furniture that no longer fit, books that had been boxed up in the basement, Christmas decorations I wasn't allowed to use, could stay. Let them deal with it. I sat down at the kitchen table one last time and wrote a note. "Marcus and Jennifer, I've decided to make some changes. The cleaning is done, as requested. Don't worry about me. I'm exactly where I need to be. Eleanor." I almost signed it Mom out of habit, then decided against it. Mothers get invitations to their grandchildren's birthday celebrations. Cleaning ladies get dismissive text messages. I left the note propped against the salt shaker Robert had made in his workshop, the one Jennifer always complained was too rustic for her taste. Then I walked through the house one last time, turning off lights, making sure the doors were locked. My phone buzzed as I loaded the last box into my trunk. A text from my sister Rose in Phoenix. "How's the birthday party?" I typed back, "Plans changed. I'll call you tomorrow." At 10:47 p.m., I pulled out of the driveway and drove toward the highway, leaving behind 25 years of memories and 8 years of slowly disappearing. I didn't look back at the house. Some doors, once you close them, should stay that way. The interstate was quiet, just long-haul truckers and night shift workers heading to jobs that started before dawn. I had no destination in mind, just a need to drive until I figured out where I belonged. The radio played soft jazz, and for the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten: freedom. Behind me, my family was probably raising toasts to Tyler's future, completely unaware that I'd just reclaimed mine. I drove for 4 hours before exhaustion forced me to stop at a truck stop outside Cincinnati. The place was brightly lit and surprisingly busy for 3 in the morning, filled with drivers grabbing coffee and gas station sandwiches. I felt invisible again, but this time, it was liberating rather than lonely. The teenage clerk at the counter looked like Tyler might in a few years. Same dark hair, same easy smile. When he handed me my coffee, he said, "Drive safe." "Ma'am, it's a crazy night to be traveling alone." "Sometimes crazy is exactly what you need," I told him. I found a quiet corner table and pulled out my phone. 17 missed calls from Marcus, 12 from Jennifer, and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. The progression was predictable. Confusion, then anger, then panic, then bargaining. 11:43 p.m. "Mom, where are you? Your car's gone." 12:15 a.m. "This isn't funny. Call me back right now." 1:22 a.m. "Mom, we're worried. Please just let us know you're safe." 2:35 a.m. "Whatever we did, we can fix it. Just come home." Home. Interesting how that word appeared only after I was gone. I turned off my phone without responding. They could worry for a while. Maybe worry would teach them something that 8 years of taking me for granted hadn't. The truck stop had a rack of travel brochures. Mammoth Cave, Dollywood, Great Smoky Mountains. Places I'd wanted to visit when Robert was alive. Trips we'd always planned for someday before cancer stole our somedays. I grabbed a handful and spread them on the table like tarot cards. A woman at the next table was watching me with curiosity. She looked to be about my age, silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing a University of Kentucky sweatshirt. "Running away from home?" she asked with a smile that suggested she'd done the same thing herself once or twice. "More like running toward something," I said. "I'm just not sure what yet." She introduced herself as Margaret Coleman, a retired teacher driving back to Louisville after visiting her daughter in Atlanta. "Worst mistake I ever made," she said, "was moving in with my kids after my husband died. Took me 2 years to get my life back." We talked until sunrise, two women who'd forgotten we existed outside our roles as mothers and grandmothers. Margaret told me about the apartment she'd found in Louisville's Highlands neighborhood, close to coffee shops and bookstores, and the kind of life she'd wanted when she was 20 but hadn't dared to pursue. "The hardest part," she said, as we prepared to leave, "isn't starting over. It's forgiving yourself for waiting so long to do it." She gave me her number and made me promise to call when I figured out where I was headed. "Women our age have to stick together," she said. "The world tries to convince us we're invisible after 60. It's up to us to prove them wrong." I spent the morning driving through Kentucky's rolling hills, thinking about visibility and invisibility, about the difference between being needed and being wanted. By noon, I'd made my decision. I stopped at a bank in Lexington and opened a new checking account with the money I'd saved. Then I found a real estate office and started looking at rental properties. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom apartment where I could think clearly without the weight of other people's expectations pressing down on me. The realtor was a cheerful woman named Beth, who didn't ask why a woman my age was apartment hunting alone. She showed me 3 places before we found the right one. A small apartment above a bakery on Main Street with hardwood floors and windows that faced east toward the morning sun. "The baker downstairs makes the best cinnamon rolls in Lexington," Beth said, as I signed the lease. "Fair warning, the smell will ruin you for grocery store pastries forever." I paid first month's rent and security deposit in cash, using the money I'd saved while pretending to be grateful for room and board in my own house. The apartment wouldn't be available until the weekend, so I checked into a nearby hotel for the rest of the week. That evening, I finally turned my phone back on. 43 missed calls, dozens of text messages, and 3 voicemails from Marcus that progressed from angry to desperate. The last message, left at 2 a.m., was different from the others. "Mom, I know you're angry about the birthday dinner. I should have made sure you were invited. We should have invited you. Please call me back. I'm scared something happened to you." For a moment, I wavered. He sounded like the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, the teenager who'd cried in my arms when his father died. But then I remembered the text message that started all this, the casual dismissal, the 8 years of slowly erasing me from my own life. I typed a single response: "I'm safe. Don't look for me." Then I turned off the phone again and went to sleep in my first bed that was truly mine in nearly a decade, dreaming of cinnamon rolls and morning sunshine and the radical act of choosing myself for once. Marcus found me through old-fashioned detective work and sheer determination. I discovered this when Claire, the bakery owner, knocked on my apartment door Friday morning with a concerned expression and a fresh croissant. "Eleanor, there's a man downstairs asking about you. Says he's your son. He's been calling every hotel and rental office in Lexington since yesterday, showing your picture around." I sighed, accepting the croissant and the inevitable. I'd had 5 peaceful days to settle in, 5 days of morning coffee without interference and evenings spent reading in my new chair by the window. It had been lovely while it lasted. "Tell him I'll be down in 10 minutes, I said. Marcus was pacing in front of the bakery when I came downstairs, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually neat hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. When he saw me, his expression cycled rapidly through relief, anger, and something that might have been genuine remorse. "Mom." He stopped pacing and just stood there, looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time in years. "You look good." I did look good, actually. 5 days of sleeping in my own bed, eating when I was hungry instead of when dinner was scheduled, and making my own choices had already started to show. I was wearing the blue sweater I'd bought for myself last Christmas, but never worn because Jennifer had said the color was too bold for someone my age. "Thank you," I said. "You look tired. I've been driving around Kentucky for 2 days, stopping at every town between here and Cincinnati, asking if anyone had seen you." He ran a hand through his hair. "Do you have any idea how many small towns there are in this state?" "I imagine you do now," I said mildly. "Would you like some coffee?" Claire makes excellent coffee. We found a table by the window, and I watched Marcus struggle with where to begin. He'd always been uncomfortable with emotional conversations, even as a child. After his father died, I'd had to teach him that feelings were meant to be expressed, not buried under busy schedules and practical concerns. "Mom," he said finally, "why didn't you tell me you were unhappy?" I stirred cream into my coffee, buying time to frame my answer carefully. "When was the last time you asked how I was doing, Marcus? I mean, really asked, when you had time to listen to the answer?" He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. I could see him thinking back, trying to remember recent conversations that went beyond logistics and schedules. "I ask you all the time," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You ask if I need anything from the store. You ask if I can watch Tyler when you and Jennifer go out. You ask if I can make dinner for company." I took a sip of coffee, watching his face. "You don't ask how I'm feeling about living in my own house as a guest. It's not like that, isn't it?" I interrupted gently. "Marcus, whose name is on the deed to that house?" Silence. He stared into his coffee cup, and I could see the moment he realized he'd never actually thought about the legal reality of our living situation. "Yours," he admitted quietly. "And whose furniture fills the living room?" "Jennifer's." "Whose bedroom am I sleeping in?" "The basement guest room." His voice was getting smaller with each answer. "So help me understand," I said, leaning forward slightly, "how I became a guest in my own home?" Marcus was quiet for a long time, processing 8 years of assumptions he'd never examined. When he finally looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "We never meant for it to happen that way," he said. "When we moved in, Tyler was only 4. Jennifer was overwhelmed. I was working 18-hour days trying to get the business off the ground. You just stepped in and took care of everything. You made it look so easy." "It wasn't easy, Marcus. It was love. I know that now." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "But somewhere along the way, we started taking that love for granted. We stopped seeing you as a person with your own needs and started seeing you as the help?" He winced. "Yeah, as the help." We sat in silence while he processed this revelation. Outside the window, Lexington was coming to life, people walking to work, students heading to campus, normal Friday morning activity in a city that was slowly becoming home. "Mom," Marcus said suddenly, "I need you to know that Jennifer's been crying for 3 days straight. Not the dramatic crying she does when she wants something. Real crying. She keeps saying she didn't realize that she never meant to push you out of your own life." I considered this information carefully. Jennifer's tears could be genuine remorse or strategic manipulation. With her, it was often hard to tell the difference. "What does she want from me, Marcus?" "She wants you to come home. We both do." He leaned forward earnestly. "But not the way things were before. We want to make changes, real changes." "Such as?" He was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling to come up with specifics rather than vague promises. "We could convert the main floor office into a bedroom for you," he said finally. "You shouldn't be sleeping in the basement. And Jennifer wants to give you back control of the kitchen. She admits she's a terrible cook, and we've all been eating frozen dinners since you left. And family events, birthdays, holidays, decisions that affect the household?" His face flushed with shame. "You'll be included in everything. I promise. No more last-minute plans that exclude you. No more treating you like childcare instead of Tyler's grandmother." I finished my coffee while considering his offer. Part of me wanted to believe that change was possible, that 8 years of ingrained patterns could be broken with good intentions and conscious effort. But I'd learned something important in my 5 days of independence. I liked making my own choices. I liked eating dinner at 7:30 instead of 6 because it suited my schedule better. I liked watching the news without Jennifer commenting on how depressing it was. I liked the quiet. Marcus, I said gently, I appreciate the apology, and I believe you mean well, but I'm not coming back. His face crumpled. Why not? If we make changes, if we treat you the way we should have been treating you all along, because this isn't about punishment, I said. It's about finally living my own life. I reached across the table and took his hand. Son, I'm 67 years old. For 25 years, I was Robert's wife. For 8 years, I've been your live-in babysitter and housekeeper. For the first time in my adult life, I get to just be Eleanor. But we need you, he said, and his voice cracked like it had when he was 14 and afraid of being alone. You needed who I was to you, I corrected. You needed someone to take care of the details so you didn't have to. That person served her purpose, Marcus. It's time for me to figure out who I am when I'm not taking care of everyone else. He squeezed my hand tightly. Will you at least think about it? Will you consider visiting? I'll think about visits, I said. But Marcus, you need to understand. I'm not coming back to live in your house. This is my home now. After he left, promising to call before driving back to Columbus, I sat in the bakery for another hour, watching people come and go. Some looked stressed and hurried, some looked content, some looked lost. For the first time in years, I looked like someone who knew exactly where she belonged. Jennifer arrived the next morning with Tyler in tow, both of them looking like they'd been up all night planning their approach. I opened my apartment door to find them standing in my hallway with the careful expressions people wear when they're about to deliver a rehearsed speech. Eleanor, Jennifer began, we need to talk. We? I looked at Tyler, who had the grace to look embarrassed. I asked him to come, Jennifer said quickly. I thought you might be more receptive if Tyler was here. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost insulting. Using my grandson as leverage in a negotiation. Assuming I'd be unable to maintain my boundaries if faced with his disappointed face. Tyler, I said, would you mind waiting downstairs while your mother and I have a conversation? He looked relieved. Sure, Grandma. I'll just get some coffee or something. After he left, I invited Jennifer into my apartment. She looked around with the same appraising expression she'd used when redecorating my living room, cataloging everything that was different from her aesthetic preferences. It's very cozy, she said, which in Jennifer speak meant small and outdated. It suits me perfectly, I replied. Coffee? She shook her head and sat on my small couch, crossing her legs and assuming the posture she used for difficult conversations. Back straight, hands folded, expression carefully neutral. Eleanor, I owe you an apology. I waited. Apologies from Jennifer usually came with conditions and expectations attached. I realize that we've been thoughtless about including you in family decisions. The birthday dinner was inexcusable, and I take full responsibility for that oversight. Oversight, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it? Her composure slipped slightly. I know you're angry. I'm not angry, Jennifer. I'm done. The blunt statement seemed to catch her off guard. She'd clearly prepared for anger, tears, demands for better treatment. She hadn't prepared for calm indifference. You can't be done, she said. You're family. Am I? I sat down across from her. Jennifer, in the 8 years you've lived in my house, how many times have you asked about my day, my interests, my friends? How many times have we had a conversation that wasn't about Tyler's schedule or Marcus's work or what you needed me to do for the household? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. I could see her mentally searching through 8 years of interactions, looking for evidence of genuine interest in me as a person. We've been busy, she said finally, between work and Tyler and maintaining the house. You've been busy, I agreed, too busy to notice that I was disappearing. You weren't disappearing. You were part of everything. I was useful for everything, I corrected. There's a difference. She was quiet for a moment, and I could see her recalibrating her approach. Jennifer was nothing if not adaptable when she wanted something. I know I haven't been the daughter-in-law you deserved, she said, and for the first time, her voice carried genuine emotion rather than strategic vulnerability. I was so focused on building our life, our family, that I forgot you were already family. It was the closest thing to a real apology I'd ever heard from her. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "I appreciate it." "Then come home with us," she said quickly. "Let us make it right. Let us show you that we can do better." I looked out my small window at the street below, where people were walking dogs and buying newspapers and living their Saturday morning lives. Simple, peaceful, unscheduled lives. "Jennifer," I said gently, "do you know what I had for breakfast this morning?" She looked confused by the question. No? French toast with strawberries and real maple syrup. I ate it at 9:30 because that's when I got hungry, not because someone else decided breakfast should be at 8. Yesterday, I read an entire book without being interrupted to discuss dinner plans or Tyler's laundry or whether we needed more paper towels. "But you love taking care of people," she said, sounding genuinely puzzled. "You're so good at it." "I was good at it," I said. Past tense. "Jennifer, I spent 25 years taking care of Robert, 30 years raising Marcus, and 8 years helping raise Tyler. I've been taking care of other people for longer than you've been alive. So what are you saying? That you don't want to be part of our lives anymore?" The pain in her voice was real, and for a moment I felt the familiar urge to comfort her, to soften my boundaries for the sake of keeping peace. "I'm saying that I want to be part of your lives as Eleanor, not as the woman who handles everything so you don't have to think about it." She was crying now, careful tears that didn't mess up her makeup, but conveyed appropriate emotion. "I don't know how to do that," she admitted. "I don't know how to have a relationship with you that isn't about logistics." It was perhaps the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. "Then maybe," I said softly, "it's time for both of us to figure that out." We sat in silence for a few minutes while Jennifer composed herself, and I watched the morning unfold outside my window. A young mother was teaching her toddler to ride a tricycle on the sidewalk, patiently running alongside while the child wobbled and laughed. "Will you come to dinner tomorrow?" Jennifer asked finally. "Just dinner. No expectations, no agenda. Just family dinner." I considered the invitation carefully. It would be a test for all of us. Could they see me as a guest rather than household staff? Could I visit without automatically taking over kitchen duties? Could we have a meal together based on choice rather than obligation? "I'll come to dinner," I said, "but I'll drive myself, and I'll leave when I'm ready to leave." She nodded quickly. "Of course, whatever you want. And Jennifer, I'm not coming back to live there. This is my home now. I need you to understand that." Her face fell, but she nodded. "I understand." After she and Tyler left, he'd given me a tentative hug and promised to call later. I sat on my small balcony with a cup of tea, thinking about the difference between being needed and being wanted. For the first time in years, I was curious to see which one tomorrow's dinner would reveal. Tyler came alone on Sunday afternoon, arriving with grocery bags and a sheepish expression that reminded me of the little boy who used to help me bake cookies by carefully measuring ingredients while standing on a kitchen chair. "I brought supplies for chocolate chip cookies," he said. "Mom said she'd try to make them, but, well, you know how that usually goes." I laughed, remembering Jennifer's last attempt at baking, which had resulted in smoke alarms and takeout pizza. "Your mother has many talents. Baking isn't one of them." We spent the afternoon in my small kitchen, Tyler carefully following my instructions while I guided him through the process I'd taught him years ago. He was more methodical now, less likely to dump entire cups of flour at once, but he still had the same focused concentration he'd shown as a child when learning something important. "Grandma," he said while we waited for the first batch to bake, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "When we moved into your house, when I was little, were Mom and Dad, were they getting divorced?" The question caught me off guard. I'd always assumed Tyler was too young to remember the tension from that time, the hushed arguments I'd overheard, the way Marcus and Jennifer had seemed to be walking on eggshells around each other. "Why do you ask?" He stirred chocolate chips into the remaining cookie dough, not meeting my eyes. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how I don't remember life before we lived with you. I called my friend Jake. His parents got divorced when we were in kindergarten, and he said he remembers them fighting all the time before they separated." "And you remember your parents fighting?" Not exactly fighting. But I remember Mom crying a lot, and Dad being gone all the time, and this feeling like something was wrong, but nobody would tell me what. He looked up at me. They stayed together, obviously, but I keep wondering if they only stayed together because we moved in with you. It was a perceptive question from a young man who was finally old enough to understand the adult dynamics that had shaped his childhood. Tyler, I said carefully, your parents were going through a very difficult time when you were 4. Your father was working around the clock to establish his business. Your mother was overwhelmed with a young child and financial stress, and they were both exhausted and scared. So they were considering divorce? I sighed, remembering those early months when Marcus and Jennifer had moved in temporarily. The fights that stopped abruptly when I walked into a room, the way they'd slept in separate bedrooms those first few weeks, the relief on both their faces when I'd offered to help with childcare and household management. They were considering their options, I said diplomatically. But Tyler, whatever problems they worked through them because they wanted to. I provided support, but I didn't save their marriage. They saved it themselves. He nodded thoughtfully. But you made it easier for them to focus on fixing things instead of just surviving day to day. Maybe. The timer went off, and we transferred the first batch of cookies to a cooling rack. Tyler immediately reached for one, burning his fingers slightly and making the same face he'd made as a 4-year-old encountering the same problem. Some things never change, I said, handing him a napkin. Some things shouldn't change, he said. But some things should change before it's too late. We were quiet while the second batch baked, both of us lost in thought. When Tyler finally spoke again, his voice was more serious than I'd heard it since he'd arrived. Grandma, I need to apologize to you. For what? For not noticing, for being so caught up in my own life, college, friends, my girlfriend, that I didn't see what was happening to you, for not calling you directly about my birthday, for not making sure you were included. He paused, struggling with the words. For letting you disappear in your own house. The pain in his voice was genuine, and I felt my heart crack slightly. This young man, my grandson, was carrying guilt that belonged to the adults who should have been paying attention. Tyler, I said gently, you were a child when we all started living together. Children aren't responsible for managing adult relationships. But I'm not a child anymore. I'm 20 years old. I should have noticed that my grandmother was sleeping in the basement while my girlfriend had sleepovers in what used to be your bedroom. I hadn't known about the sleepovers, and the information stung more than I wanted to admit. But Tyler's face was so full of genuine remorse that I couldn't focus on the hurt. What matters, I said, is that you're noticing now. Is it too late? He asked. Have we damaged things so badly that you can't forgive us? I looked at my grandson, tall now, broad-shouldered, with Marcus's eyes, but a gentleness that reminded me of Robert. He was old enough to take responsibility for his choices, old enough to understand consequences, but young enough to still believe that love could fix anything. Tyler, I said, forgiveness isn't the issue. I'm not angry at you or at your parents. I'm just done being someone I never wanted to be. What do you mean? I mean, I don't want to be the grandmother who's always available, always accommodating, always putting everyone else's needs before her own. I want to be the grandmother you choose to visit because you enjoy my company, not because you need something from me. He nodded slowly. So we have to earn back a relationship with you? You have to build a new relationship with me, I corrected, based on who I actually am, not who I was convenient to be. After he left, promising to call later in the week just to talk rather than to arrange anything, I sat in my reading chair with the last of the cookies and thought about second chances. Some people deserved them. Some people had simply made mistakes out of thoughtlessness rather than malice. Tyler fell into that category. Young, self-absorbed in the way young people often are, but fundamentally good-hearted and capable of growth. The question was whether his parents fell into the same category or whether their patterns were too deeply ingrained to change. Tomorrow's dinner would be the first real test. Outside my window, the sun was setting over Lexington, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Thanks for the cookies and the conversation. I love you, Grandma. The real you, not the version who does everything for everyone else. For the first time since I'd left Columbus, I cried, not from sadness or anger, but from relief. At least one relationship in my family might be salvageable after all. The dinner invitation came with specific instructions. Just come as our guest. Don't bring anything. Don't help with cleanup. We want to practice treating you the way we should have all along. Sweet words. But I'd learned to judge Jennifer by her actions, not her promises. I drove to my former house Sunday evening, parking on the street instead of in the driveway. Small gesture, but it felt important. I was visiting, not coming home. Marcus opened the door wearing an apron that still had the price tag attached. Behind him, I could smell something burning and hear Jennifer's voice from the kitchen, using words I'd taught Tyler never to say around adults. "Mom," Marcus said, looking genuinely relieved to see me. Perfect timing. Jennifer's having a small, culinary challenge. I followed him into the kitchen where Jennifer stood over the stove, frantically stirring something that looked like cement mixer contents. Her face was flushed, her perfect hair was disheveled, and she was clearly on the verge of tears. "The sauce separated," she announced without looking up, "and I think the roast is dying." Despite everything, I felt the familiar urge to step in and fix things. 8 years of muscle memory don't disappear overnight, but I caught myself and remained in the doorway, hands folded, waiting to see how they'd handle their crisis without me. "Maybe we should order pizza," Marcus suggested helplessly. "No!" Jennifer's voice was sharp with frustration. "I said I'd cook dinner for Eleanor, and I'm going to cook dinner." Tyler appeared from the living room, took one look at the scene, and walked to the stove. "Mom, step back. Let me help." I watched with interest as Tyler took charge of the kitchen crisis. He'd apparently learned more from our cooking sessions than I'd realized. He salvaged the sauce with patience and butter, rescued the roast from overcooking, and somehow turned Jennifer's culinary disaster into something resembling dinner. "Where did you learn to do that?" Jennifer asked, watching him work with obvious amazement. "Grandma taught me," Tyler said simply. "She always said cooking disasters are just opportunities to practice problem-solving." The look Jennifer shot me was unreadable. Embarrassment? Gratitude? Resentment that her son had learned crucial life skills from someone she'd been taking for granted? We sat down to dinner at 7:30, half an hour later than planned, but nobody complained. The food was adequate, the conversation careful and polite, like strangers trying to make a good impression. Marcus asked about my apartment, Jennifer complimented my sweater, Tyler shared stories from college that didn't require anyone to do anything for him. It was pleasant. It was also completely artificial. "This feels weird," Tyler said suddenly, expressing what we were all thinking. "We're acting like people who just met." "Maybe that's not a bad thing," I said. "Maybe we need to meet each other as adults instead of assuming we know who everyone is." "But we're family," Marcus said. "We shouldn't have to get to know each other." "Family doesn't mean you automatically understand each other, son. It just means you're committed to trying." Jennifer had been quiet through most of the meal, but now she looked up from pushing food around her plate. "Eleanor, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you happier? Living alone? Making your own decisions? Not having to worry about anyone else's schedule?" The question was more direct than I'd expected from Jennifer, and more honest. "Yes," I said simply. "I am." She nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about what you said, about not knowing how to have a relationship with you that isn't about logistics. You're right. I don't know how to be around you without asking you to do something." "Then maybe," I suggested gently, "we start with just being around each other." After dinner, I kept my promise to myself and didn't help with cleanup. Instead, I sat in the living room, my former living room, now decorated entirely to Jennifer's taste, and watched Marcus and Jennifer navigate washing dishes together. They were clumsy at it, clearly out of practice with shared domestic duties. But they were trying. When I got up to leave at 9 o'clock, Marcus walked me to my car. "Mom," he said, "I know tonight was awkward, but will you come back? Maybe next Sunday?" I considered the request. Dinner had been strained but not unpleasant. They were making genuine effort, even if they weren't sure how to sustain it. "I'll come back," I said. "But Marcus, I need you to understand something. I'm not auditioning to be part of your family again. I'm deciding whether I want to be." He nodded soberly. "I understand. And Mom, thank you for giving us a chance to figure this out." As I drove back to Lexington, I reflected on the evening. They were trying, but it felt like actors playing roles they'd never rehearsed. The question was whether they could sustain the performance long enough for it to become genuine. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Thanks for coming tonight. Sorry if it felt weird. We're all learning how to be different people." Maybe that was the key. Maybe they weren't trying to fix the old relationships. Maybe they were trying to build new ones. 3 weeks into my new life, I discovered that independence had its own rhythm. Monday morning book club at the library, Tuesday afternoon gardening with my neighbor Harold, Wednesday farmers market shopping, Thursday volunteering at the literacy center, Friday coffee with Margaret Coleman, who'd driven up from Louisville to check on me. It was a full life, a chosen life, and I was surprised by how little I missed the constant demands of managing other people's schedules. Marcus had been calling every few days, checking in without asking for anything specific. Jennifer had sent 2 texts, one sharing a photo of her successful attempt at making my pot roast recipe, another asking for advice about Tyler's upcoming graduation party. Progress, of sorts. Then Tyler called on Thursday evening, his voice tight with an emotion I couldn't identify. "Grandma, can I come visit this weekend? Not for dinner or anything planned. I need to talk to someone who isn't invested in keeping family peace." "Of course," I said immediately. "What's going on?" "I'll explain when I get there. But Grandma, I think I understand now why you left." He arrived Friday afternoon, carrying a manila folder and wearing the expression of someone who'd discovered uncomfortable truths. I made coffee and waited for him to find his words. "I've been going through Dad's business files," he said finally, "for a project at school about family businesses. I thought I'd write about his company, maybe interview him about being an entrepreneur." "That sounds like a nice project." "Yeah, it was supposed to be." He opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "Grandma, did you know Dad took out a second mortgage on your house 3 years ago?" I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What? A second mortgage? For $80,000. Tyler's voice was carefully controlled, but I could see the anger underneath. "He used your house as collateral for a business loan without telling you." I stared at the papers Tyler handed me, seeing my address, seeing the legal description of my property, seeing Marcus's signature but not mine. "This isn't possible. He can't mortgage my house without my consent. He can if he has power of attorney for your finances." The words hit me like a physical blow. Power of attorney. The document Marcus had convinced me to sign 2 years ago, just in case something happens to you, Mom. The document I'd signed to give him access to my accounts for emergencies, never imagining he'd use it to borrow against my house. "Tyler," I said slowly, "how much does your father owe on this second mortgage?" $73,000, plus the original mortgage still has about $60,000 left. I did the math quickly. Marcus owed more than my house was worth. If he defaulted on the business loan, I could lose the house I'd owned free and clear when Robert died. "There's more," Tyler said quietly. He pulled out another document. "The business loan?" It wasn't for business expansion like he told Mom. He used the money to pay off their credit cards and buy Mom's car. They've been living beyond their means for years, using your house as their personal ATM. I sat back in my chair, processing this information. No wonder Marcus had been so panicked when I left. No wonder Jennifer had been so desperate to get me to come back. They weren't worried about my well-being. They were worried about losing their collateral. "Tyler," I said carefully, "why are you showing me this?" "Because I think you have a right to know that your son committed financial fraud against you, and because I'm tired of my parents lying to everyone, including themselves." "What are you going to do?" He was quiet for a moment, staring out my window at the street where normal people were living honest lives. "I don't know. I love my parents, but what they did to you is unforgivable, and they're still doing it, still acting like they're trying to rebuild your relationship when really they're just trying to keep you from finding out they've been stealing from you." I thought about the recent dinner invitations, the careful apologies, Marcus's suddenly regular check-in calls, all of it designed to keep me satisfied enough not to look too closely at my financial situation. "Grandma," Tyler said, "I think you need to get a lawyer." "I think you're right." That evening, after Tyler left, promising to keep our conversation confidential until I decided how to handle the situation, I sat alone with the documents he'd given me. $80,000. Borrowed against my house without my knowledge, used to subsidize their lifestyle while they treated me like household staff. I'd thought I was angry when they excluded me from Tyler's birthday dinner. I'd thought I was hurt when they made me sleep in the basement of my own house. But this was different. This was theft. This was my own son, using legal documents I'd trusted him with to steal my financial security. My phone rang. Marcus, calling for his regular check-in. "Hi, Mom. How was your day?" I looked at the documents spread across my kitchen table, evidence of years of deception, and made a decision. "It was educational," I said calmly. "Very educational indeed." Monday morning, I walked into the law office of Patricia Morrison, the attorney Margaret Coleman had recommended. Patricia was a woman about my age with silver hair and sharp eyes who specialized in elder financial abuse. She looked over Tyler's documents with professional calm that didn't quite hide her anger. "Mrs. Walsh," she said finally, "what your son did is called financial exploitation. Using power of attorney to mortgage your property without your knowledge or consent is illegal, regardless of family relationship. What are my options?" "Several. We can demand immediate repayment. We can have the power of attorney revoked and the mortgage reversed. Or we can file criminal charges. The question is what outcome you want." I thought about Marcus as a 14-year-old boy, crying in my arms after his father's funeral. I thought about the young man who'd worked 18-hour days to build his business, who'd married Jennifer in my backyard, who'd brought Tyler to visit me in the hospital when I had pneumonia 3 years ago. I also thought about 8 years of sleeping in my own basement, 8 years of being treated like hired help, and the calculated deception of recent weeks. "I want my house back," I said. "Free and clear, the way it was when Robert died. That's going to require them to pay off both mortgages immediately. Do they have that kind of liquid capital?" I almost laughed. If they had $130,000 lying around, they wouldn't have needed to steal from me in the first place. Patricia nodded. "Then they'll probably have to sell the house to pay off the mortgages and give you the proceeds. Are you prepared for that possibility? Was I prepared to force my son and daughter-in-law to sell the home where they'd raised Tyler, where they'd built their life together? The house that had been mine first, that I'd shared with them out of love and gotten betrayal in return? Yes, I said. I'm prepared for that. We spent the morning preparing legal documents. Patricia would send Marcus a letter demanding full disclosure of all financial transactions involving my property, immediate repayment of all unauthorized loans, and revocation of the power of attorney agreement. "Mrs. Walsh," Patricia said as I prepared to leave, "I need to warn you that this will likely destroy your relationship with your son and daughter-in-law. Financial disputes within families rarely end in reconciliation." "The relationship was already destroyed," I said. "I just didn't know it yet." I drove home to Lexington feeling strangely calm. For weeks I'd been questioning whether I'd been too harsh in leaving, whether I should have tried harder to fix things from within. Now I knew the truth. There had never been anything for me to fix. The foundation of our relationship had been rotten from the beginning. My phone rang as I was making lunch. Jennifer's name on the screen. "Eleanor, I hope you don't mind me calling. I wanted to invite you to Tyler's graduation party next month. Just family, nothing elaborate." The audacity was breathtaking. She was planning a party at my house using money borrowed against my property without my knowledge, and asking me to attend as a guest. "That sounds lovely," I said pleasantly. "Will you be serving food?" "Oh yes, I was thinking of having it catered. There's this wonderful company that Marcus found, very reasonable prices." Reasonable prices paid with stolen money. I wondered how long they'd been living this double life, spending beyond their means while presenting themselves as successful professionals, managing their finances responsibly. "Jennifer," I said, "I'm curious about something. The house has seemed different the last few times I've visited. Have you done some remodeling recently? A pause, then, just some updates. You know how old houses need constant maintenance. Updates. Like the new kitchen counters I'd noticed, the updated flooring in the hallways, the expensive light fixtures throughout the main floor. All paid for, apparently, with money borrowed against my equity. Well, I said, I'm sure it's all very nice. I'll look forward to seeing the improvements at Tyler's party. After I hung up, I sat in my quiet kitchen and thought about lies and secrets and the different kinds of theft that exist in families. They'd stolen my money, but more than that, they'd stolen years of my life, making me complicit in my own exploitation by convincing me I was needed when really I was just convenient. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. How did it go with the lawyer? I typed back, better than expected. Your parents will be hearing from her this week. Are you okay with whatever happens next? I looked around my small apartment, my books on the shelves I'd chosen, my coffee cup on the table I'd bought. My life arranged exactly as I wanted it, and typed my response. I'm exactly where I need to be. Patricia's letter was delivered Wednesday morning. I know because Marcus called me at 7:23 a.m., his voice shaking with what sounded like genuine shock. Mom, what the hell is this letter? You're accusing me of financial fraud? You're threatening to have me arrested? I'm not threatening anything, Marcus. I'm simply asking for an accounting of what you've done with my property. Your property? Mom, we've been partners in that house for 8 years. You can't just decide to pull the rug out from under us. Partners. That was a new interpretation of our arrangement. Marcus, I said calmly, when did we become partners? I don't remember signing any partnership agreements. I don't remember being consulted about the second mortgage. Silence. Then, I was protecting your interests. The business needed capital, and using the house as collateral was the most efficient way to secure funding. Protecting my interests by borrowing $80,000 without my knowledge? You have power of attorney on file. It's perfectly legal. Legal and ethical aren't the same thing, son. Another silence, longer this time. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was different, harder, more calculating. It was the voice he used with difficult business clients, not the voice he used with his mother. Mom, I think you need to be very careful about how you handle this situation. If you force us to sell the house, Tyler loses his childhood home. Jennifer loses the kitchen she's spent years perfecting. I lose the office where I've built my business. Is that really what you want? The threat was subtle but clear. If I pursued this legally, I'd be responsible for destroying the family. I'd be the selfish old woman who put money above relationships. Marcus, I said quietly, what I want is the truth. How long have you been using my house to secure loans without telling me? It's not like that. How long? A pause. Then, 3 years. But Mom, everything I borrowed was invested back into the business. It's not like I spent it on vacation or jewelry. You spent it paying off credit cards and buying Jennifer's car. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. He hadn't expected me to have specific information about how the money was used. Who told you that? He asked finally. I thought about Tyler, about the courage it had taken for him to bring me those documents, knowing it would destroy his family's carefully maintained facade. I wasn't going to expose him to his father's anger. Does it matter who told me? Is it true? The business loan covered multiple expenses. Marcus, yes or no? Did you use money borrowed against my house to pay personal debts? Another long pause. Some of it, yes. But we were planning to pay it back. When? In what universe were you planning to pay back $80,000 while living beyond your means? We're not living beyond our means. You borrowed money against my house to pay off credit card debt. That's the definition of living beyond your means. I could hear him breathing heavily, probably pacing in what used to be my kitchen, trying to find an angle that would make his actions seem reasonable. Mom, he said finally, I know you're angry, but we can work this out. We don't need lawyers and threats. We're family. Family doesn't steal from each other, Marcus. I didn't steal anything. The house is still there. It's still increasing in value. You still have a place to live. I have a place to live that I chose for myself, I interrupted. And as for the house still being there, what happens if your business fails? What happens if you can't make the mortgage payments? Do I lose my house because you decided to gamble with my equity? The business isn't going to fail. Famous last words of every entrepreneur who ever lost everything. He was quiet for so long, I thought he might have hung up. Then, "What do you want, Mom? What's it going to take to make this go away?" Make this go away. Like my legitimate anger about being defrauded was an inconvenience he could negotiate away. I want full repayment of all unauthorized loans secured by my property. I want the power of attorney revoked. And I want an apology that acknowledges what you did was wrong. I can't pay back $80,000 overnight. Then you'll have to sell the house. Mom, please, think about Tyler. Think about what this will do to him. I thought about Tyler, who'd had the integrity to expose his parents' deception even knowing it would hurt him. Tyler, who'd said he was tired of his parents lying to everyone, including themselves. I am thinking about Tyler, I said. I'm thinking about what kind of example you're setting for him. I'm thinking about what lessons he's learning about honesty and integrity and how you treat people you claim to love. You're really going to destroy your own family over money? And there it was. The final insult. After 8 years of exploitation, after years of being treated like household staff, after discovering that my own son had been stealing from me while pretending to care about my well-being, he had the audacity to suggest that I was the one destroying the family. "Marcus," I said, "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just finally refusing to pretend that what you've built on lies and theft is worth preserving." I hung up before he could respond, then turned off my phone entirely. Outside my window, Lexington was coming to life. People heading to honest jobs, living within their means, treating their family members with respect. Tomorrow, Patricia would begin the formal process of recovering my stolen equity. Marcus and Jennifer would have 30 days to pay back the money or put the house on the market. For the first time in 8 years, I was going to sleep in a bed I owned free and clear, in a home no one could steal from me. The call came from Tyler 2 weeks later, his voice carefully controlled in a way that reminded me he was no longer a child, but a young man dealing with adult consequences. "Grandma, they're selling the house. Mom's been packing all day, crying over every box. Dad's been locked in his office making phone calls to real estate agents. How are you handling all this, sweetheart?" A long pause. "I'm angry at them, but I'm sad too. I know what they did was wrong, but it's still hard watching everything fall apart." I understood. Tyler was grieving not just the loss of his childhood home, but the loss of his image of his parents as people who could be trusted to make good decisions. "Tyler, this isn't your fault, and it's not really my fault either. This is the consequence of choices your parents made over several years. I know that logically, but it still feels like our family is breaking apart." "Maybe," I said gently, "it needed to break apart. Maybe what you had wasn't as solid as it appeared." 3 days later, Marcus called me for the last time. "The house sold," he said, without preamble. "We got asking price. After paying off both mortgages and the real estate fees, there's about $40,000 left over." "Good. I assume Patricia will receive a check for the full amount?" "Mom," his voice broke slightly, "I need you to know that I never meant for things to turn out this way. I thought I was making smart financial decisions. I thought I was protecting everyone. You thought you could handle my money better than I could? I thought you'd never need to know about the details. Because you planned to pay it back before I found out? Because I thought you'd always be living with us, so it wouldn't matter whose name was on the documents." There it was, the assumption that had underlain everything, that I would always be available, always be dependent, always be too grateful for their care to ask difficult questions about my own assets. "Marcus," I said, "where are you and Jennifer going to live?" "We found a rental house across town. It's smaller, older, but it's what we can afford now that we're actually living within our means." "And Tyler? He's staying in the dorms next year instead of commuting. Says he thinks it's time he learned to be independent. Smart kid. He'd learned from his parents' mistakes even if they hadn't." "Mom," Marcus continued, "I know you probably don't want to hear this, but Jennifer and I have been in counseling. Financial counseling and marriage counseling. We're trying to figure out how we got so far off track. That's good, Marcus. I hope it helps. The counselor says that we created a pattern where we used other people to avoid facing our own problems. We used you to manage our household so we didn't have to communicate about domestic responsibilities. We used your house as financial security so we didn't have to live within our budget. It was the most honest thing he'd said to me in years. What did you learn from that insight? That we've been terrible to you for a long time, and we called it love. I felt tears prick my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief that my son might finally understand what he'd done. Marcus, do you remember when you were 14 and your father was dying? How I used to tell you that love without respect isn't really love. Yeah, I remember. You and Jennifer cared about me, but you didn't respect me. You didn't respect my autonomy, my intelligence, or my right to make decisions about my own life and assets. That's not love, son. That's possession. I know that now. We were both quiet for a moment. I could hear Jennifer in the background, probably eavesdropping on our conversation. Mom, Marcus said finally, is there any chance you could forgive us? Not now, maybe not for a long time, but eventually? I've already forgiven you, Marcus, but forgiveness doesn't mean trust, and it doesn't mean going back to the way things were. What does it mean? It means I hope you learn to be better people. It means I hope you build a marriage based on honesty instead of shared financial irresponsibility. And it means I hope Tyler learns from your mistakes. 6 months later, I received a graduation announcement in the mail. Tyler Walsh, Bachelor of Business Administration, summa cum laude. The return address was a rental house across town from my former home. I drove to Columbus for the graduation ceremony, sitting in the back of the auditorium where I could see my grandson cross the stage to receive his diploma. He looked confident, mature, ready to build his own life on his own terms. After the ceremony, Tyler found me in the crowd. "Grandma, you came." I wouldn't miss it. He hugged me properly, without reservation or agenda. "Will you come to dinner? Mom and Dad are taking me to celebrate, and they specifically asked me to invite you." I looked across the parking lot where Marcus and Jennifer stood next to their older, more modest car, waiting to see what I would decide. They looked different, less polished, less confident, but maybe more real. "I'll come to dinner," I said, "but I'll drive myself." Over pasta at a family restaurant that was nothing like Chez Laurent, we talked about Tyler's job prospects, his girlfriend's veterinary school applications, his plans for the future. Marcus and Jennifer asked careful questions about my life in Lexington, about my volunteer work, about the book club I joined. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it was honest. No one pretended we were the family we used to be. No one assumed anything about anyone else's availability or obligations. When I got up to leave, Jennifer walked me to my car. "Eleanor," she said, "I want you to know that losing the house was the best thing that could have happened to us. We've learned to live within our means, to communicate about money, to handle our own domestic responsibilities. I'm glad to hear that. And Marcus has learned to cook," she added with a small smile. "Badly, but he's learning. That's progress." She was quiet for a moment, then, "I know we can't undo what we did, but I hope someday you might want to be part of our lives again. The real version of our lives, not the fantasy we were living before." "Maybe," I said. "Let's see what kind of people you become." As I drove back to Lexington, I thought about second chances and new beginnings. Some relationships could be rebuilt on more honest foundations. Others needed to end so that better ones could take their place. I had $40,000 in my savings account, a little apartment that smelled like cinnamon rolls every morning, and a life that belonged entirely to me. At 68, I was finally learning who Eleanor Walsh was when she wasn't taking care of everyone else. It was, I discovered, exactly who I was meant to be all along. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.